Welcome back, everyone. So it's a bit longer as SortOf and Goblin, Xanser just lost, took their time doing the vetoes, but it is going to be on Mech Depot first. It's weird. Usually have this as the first map all the time. But before we got too far into continuing this cast, I quickly wanted to shout out all the subs we've had. Thank you very much to, let's see, where did we start off here today? Zerg Hug Party donated 83 bits, oddly specific. And Aquarius XXX, 21 months. I'll have to see how does Geek Girl Con. I wish you could stay. That's pretty cool. I assume they already left. So have fun, retroactively. Staffy 93 for 17 months. Mega Man Red for 27 months. Terminator for 20 months. I hear Ting's need meet everyone in chat at StarCraft, but that's absolutely true. And Jim Sock donated around 100 bits as well. So thank you all for that. Now we can get into this game.
Yeah, reminder, by the way, for those who didn't hear, September was supposed to end today because it's supposed to be September, like September, in case the play on words didn't make sense to you. But that was where subs were half off, but they decided to extend it all the way until halfway through October. So September is still active. If you guys are still interested in subbing or even resubbing to Base Trade, because it's now only $2.50 instead of $5, or, you know, $5 instead of $10 if you decide to do tier 2 and tier 3 and all that stuff. So consider doing that or consider renewing.
Yeah, that would be super cool. We certainly would like to keep our sub counts bumped up a little bit. So we dip well below 1,000. So that would be awesome. But guys, we are ready to go into the first game of the qualifying match on Mech Depot. See ya soon. Welcome back. It is the winners qualifying match. A ZVP in the bottom left as the blue Zerg. He is SortOf.
And in the top right, we have the red Protoss player who's been on fire today. Give it up for Goblin, Team Red Bloods.
Yeah, he said that he's in trouble now, though, going up against SortOf. I don't know if he was just playing pretend or SortOf actually does give him trouble, but I would say that Xanser and SortOf can be in a lot of times the same tier of power level. Sometimes SortOf looks more consistent than Xanser, and sometimes Xanser looks more brilliant in individual games, but certainly they're on the same tier, so I don't know. I want to say Goblin was mostly kidding, but he still has a decent chance here, but he did have to use 2 all-ins to defeat Xanser as quickly as he did. What does he have to do against SortOf?
Yeah, Mr. Mechanics can sort of be a bit of a monster. You might even call him a bit of a goblin for Goblin. That was a really forced series of jokes, but I want to go for it anyways. Regardless, though, SortOf, of course, is a really, really scary player. Mr. Mechanics, that nickname is actually not given lightly by literally every single person in the scene. I have gone around asking people, hey, who do you consider to have the best mechanics in the scene? And memes aside, literally every single person almost always just says SortOf. So, he's not going to be an easy player to just completely outplay mechanically or macro-wise. So we may see Goblin just try and take advantage of the same kind of things he did versus Xanser, going for a lot of those mind games, trying to go for the early all-ins and catch his opponent off guard.
I'm surprised. I always thought that was a meme. Not that I ever doubted that SortOf was like a good player. I just, I would have figured that people would have had better mechanics.
It's possible that also, like, everyone always responds with a meme because that's the first thing that comes to mind. But, like, I have legitimately done this for, like, a little... Like, I do downtime content in my channel and stuff, and I've asked, like, over 40 people now. And I would say, like, 37 of them have said SortOf, like, immediately.
Very interesting.
I think like 2 or 3 people were like, oh, I'm sure it's Byun because he's, like, so good.
Oh yeah, did they know that Koreans were available to add?
Yeah. I said who was the best in the world.
I feel like they're still kidding. There's like an agreement
Maybe.
upon all the people you talk to say sort of.
I think that it's probably Scarlet because North American players are actually really good zombie growth.
Yeah, okay. Everyone knows it's innovation. Just cut the crap. Innovation's the best.
If innovation's the best, why isn't he winning every tournament?
Because he's saving it up for the biggest tournament in the world, BlizzCon.
Oh, I didn't know that we had another. Oh my God, I'm actually not Petit Drogo. Oh my God, I know this name. Lilbo. We have a Lilbo situation. He's saving it up.
Oh my God.
Preparing for he's
like, wait a
preparing
second.
for Warcraft 4.
Where are you going with this, dear Lord? Thank you
That joke would have been
to-
good if I executed it.
Yeah, maybe. It's a big maybe. Thank you to Kilps31 for 12-month resub. A year, so that's a part 2 for you, good sir. And Alginar for 2 months. Thank you for that resub. We do have Goblin with the Stalkers, but sort of with the Overlord speed. I think he knows how Goblin plays, and would rather spend 100 earlier on to have the better defense later.
Yeah, there is still potentially the question of, is this going to be charged or is this going to end up being adepts and resonating glaives? Because so far he's only seen the Stalker and an adept, and of course you can't really click on the Twilight Council and say like, oh, this is clearly charged or this is clearly resonating glaives. But overall the defense tends to be the same kind of unit composition. You tend to get up a lot of lings and you tend to get the banelings and some queens.
Right. The key really in that first game, I think it was also on Mech Depot against Xanster, was that the banelings weren't ready to go immediately. So it really had that chance to snowball. So having the banelings all ready to go is very different. You can kind of stop that snowball from happening. Hopefully you snipe the Warp Prism as well. But Goblin, having been scouted so thoroughly, decides not to add any more gateways. He added the gases, he added the third base, and now he's going into double Stargate.
Yeah, I actually really like this. And you know what? Sort of, it's worth noting, just because sometimes people like to speculate on this kind of stuff, sort of was busy playing his series while Goblin was playing versus Xanster, so he should not have been able to watch any of that series. So I don't think any mind games will be carrying over from that series of like Goblin saying, well, if he saw my series versus Xanster, he'll know I was doing this, but now I'll double mind game and go for Star. I think this is just within the context of this series.
Yeah. Plus, they probably play each other like, occasionally on ladder. There's always such a funny thing where like not every good player is facing each other on ladder. There are those tiers we talked about earlier where like, you know, sometimes Snoot will never face Goblin, you know, just throwing out names here. But I gotta imagine they play each other occasionally, and Goblin is seemingly well known as cheesy and all-inny.
Okay, well, the Warp Prism is going to have a hard time making a whole lot happen over here. Even without banelings really being morphed in, SortOf is entirely prepared, and he's going for some counter harassment that is going to not only scout out the Stargates, but get 5 workers worth of damage and probably a bit more of lost mining time.
He's going up to 4 Stargates immediately? That seems a little overzealous.
Actually, it's the opposite of overzealous, because he's not going to have any minerals or any sort of units besides Stargate units. He's not going to have any zealots at all.
Yeah, I was going to try and do that joke, and then I realized it wasn't a great way to do it, so...
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the beautiful thing about me, is that I don't care if it's a terrible joke. I'll still make it. But the other kind of joke right now is oracles without much energy have a hard time cleaning up Zerglings.
Yeah. They just... If this had been automatically into a Stargate first, into double Stargate, into triple Stargate, he has enough oracles to probably not let that happen. But since he's a little delayed and he's trying to catch up now, he'll have 4, 12, whatever oracles soon enough. The damage has already been done. 20 probes in total. I guess it was still barely in time with the attack up here. This Overlord somehow still survives. That shouldn't happen. No, Phoenix, no! Are you kidding?
No.
What the hell?
Well, it doesn't have anything inside of it, at least for now. But yeah, that is going to be another potential option for later on that sort of can do some more drops in the main base. War Prism getting denied once again, getting a little bit low as well, but the Spire is on the way. The kind of funny thing here is that I actually think that there are some potential opportunities if Goblin realizes that there's a Spire with the Oracle Scout and he starts making a lot of Phoenix, like you can actually maybe take some really good trades versus like a big Muta Remax or something and maybe make something happen.
We've seen Spire be hardcore denied because they do scout it and they transfer over to Phoenixes. Then it's that game of like Muta Corruptor, which is really hard to play. You've also seen Mutas end up doing enough damage to snowball that even if they do get the Phoenixes, it's like the damage already been done. I don't need my mutas anymore. But it's straight to Corruptors for SortOf. It plants down enough Spore Crawlers in each base that Oracles would really have to dedicate 3 in each, or almost 3 in each. And he also got a secondary scout into the main base to see that there was continued Oracle production, not Void Ray production. So now it's Phoenixes, right? But the key was not Void Ray. And as long as they aren't producing Void Rays too quickly, you can definitely get enough Corruptors to take down their air army.
Yeah, Phoenix do not want to be facing off in a head-on engagement versus those Corruptors. That armor just really makes the Phoenix basically tickle the Corruptors. So this is a kind of worst-case situation right now, or scenario for Goblin. He's been able to get back up a pretty decent work count, back up to 57, but now that the Corruptors are here, he's realizing, oh, wait a second, you didn't make a bunch of mutas, you did make Corruptors, and are they really going to be able to do a whole lot? Well, the Phoenix might actually be able to push the Corruptors back and prevent them from, like, killing a Nexus or something, but it is still a difficult situation.
That's a little dangerous for SortOf. There could have been a Mothership Core closer by, and she had to mosey on over. The Spore Crawler, there's only one of them here. It's not going to cover. Well, Zealot's recovered over here, though. So loss of a 4th base, but maybe recoverable.
This is really not as bad as I thought it would end up being for Goblin. I mean, killing off the 4th, yes, there is already another hatchery going down on the south side of the map, but it's still just now starting, and I'm actually really starting to like this situation a bit more for Goblin, because one of the things you talk with many, many Zerg players out there that frustrates them beyond no end is once the Protoss player gets up to a decent number of carriers and like that big, scary air army, a lot of Zerg players feel like unless they just control everything absolutely perfectly, they actually do struggle versus like a decent number of carriers, whether it be with Infestors or Corruptors or whatever. It can be very, very difficult to really take a good engagement against them.
That's definitely true. It's a very frustrating style to play against, because if you don't stop it early, then you might not be able to stop it. These Infestors did not get patching lands. They're actually being targeted. He made 3, now only down to 1.
Okay, and I like that Goblin at least tries to get out of here with a few of these Oracles. Even if you sacrifice a lot of them to get some damage done, keeping just a handful of them for Revelations and everything, you want to be able to keep an eye on where those Infestors are going to be. But there's finally Pathogen Glands coming down. I wonder if we'll see Neural Parasite. There's like different styles from Zerg players on how to try and deal with this army.
Yeah, I do see a lot of people experimenting with Neural Parasites to grab the Mothership, to grab the carriers. Hell, even to grab the Void Rays and overcharge them whenever they are made. But I was really scared for Goblin. He was going up against a pretty quick Corruptors, thought he was not going to be able to get enough, but clearly is held on well. He's on his way to more upgrades, carriers, and Storm, while on 4 bases, which puts him in a pretty perfect spot. If SortOf isn't ready to kill him now, then he probably won't be able to kill him before it's seriously just late game versus late game, which is very tough.
Okay, well, Storm going up does make the late game even more difficult for SortOf to close off against, but Goblin is still about 50-ish or almost 60 army supply, or just general supply away from maxing out. Decent fungal, catches some of the Phoenix.
Yeah, but
Good start.
Targeted down a Viper that was in the middle of all those Corruptors before that happened. So Viper for 3 Phoenix isn't exactly a fair trade. That's actually a pretty nice snipe.
Yeah. I feel as though one of the big problems right now, the first big problem that Goblin will be facing off against is that SortOf is going to hit that max out point sooner than Goblin, and once you're maxed out, yeah, there's like some value in like remaxing, getting a little bit of a bank, especially as a Zerg player, but I feel like it should cue something from SortOf to go out and try and make the attack happen. He does have a decent-ish mix of units. I guess he's lost a lot of the Infestors. If he had like 2 or 3 more Infestors, I would like it a lot more. Oh man, I don't know. What do you think, Zombie Grub?
I'm looking at this too, and so SortOf, he went for basically everything you would ever need against super late game Protoss right off the bat, which means that he actually wasn't maxed out. He's still not maxed out, and even if he was, it really isn't that quick in the overall scheme of things. Like 13-minute max out is like, big whoop. And he's doing it with also units that I'm just like, are they really worth getting? Sometimes if you hit them before they're really powerful, mass Broodlords are like just like, it's almost like an all-in move. Like, I hope these work because I have 14 of them. But 4 extra, 5, 6, like, Spore Crawler line, I don't know. I think no matter what, SortOf is going to be facing off against the late game Protoss army, where feedbacks are available, storms are available, and that's the only thing Goblin is missing right now is a couple of Void Rays to round out his army.
Well, the Spore Crawlers are starting to burrow their way forward. Creeps starting to spread further and further into the cannons. And the Broodlords, this is enough that they can slowly pick away at the cannons and kind of force a bit of a timer onto Goblin. Goblin's going for the nice little War Prism warp in on the south side. Going to try and get some damage done at a pretty vulnerable looking base. Actually, that hatchery is going to go down in a matter of seconds. So SortOf is forced into a bit of an awkward position. Has to segment off the majority of his Lings and some of the Hydras over here. Is that going to leave the rest of his units a bit exposed?
Doesn't look that way. His air army certainly is formidable with 17 Corruptors, 3 Vipers, and a bunch of Spore Crawlers. I'm not sure Goblin should be going into this.
I mean, the feedbacks are nice, but these Corruptors are going to be able to decimate the Void Rays pretty quickly, and the Carriers can hold their own for a little bit, but it's really the Spore Crawlers that make it hard for them to actually engage into this.
Yeah, like the Spore Crawlers added so much extra DPS. Even if they were targeting the Interceptors initially, they eventually got around to the Void Rays. There simply weren't that many Void Rays, which is why I was extra hesitant for him to go in there. He only had a handful of High Templars, so most of them went down on feedbacks, which were very important. If Blinded Clouds or Abducts also went down to that army, Goblin's probably dead. I still think that waiting and patience would have worked out better.
Oh, fungal growths and storms coming down on both sides. The Corruptor's getting awfully low, but now these Carriers are starting to get focus fire down. Looks like the Phoenix will reign supreme, pushing back those Corruptors, but man, the Spore Crawlers continue to add in so much DPS. And those Broodlords, it's just the consistent damage, even during that engagement, taking out this base and finally forcing Goblin to retreat, bringing him back down to a 3-base economy.
Close enough to it. That should go down. Yeah, he's waiting for 4 more Carriers, but the real problem is having to get even close to max out again. Goblin worked his entire game to get to a 180-ish supply and then took that fight. He went down to 160, took another fight, went down to 140. It's just a constant struggle to get back up. Even though his units are really good, he is still facing SortOf, who has those remax potentials. They were cut a little bit because SortOf lost 2 bases that he's only just now replacing. And that's what, like, the only thing that's giving Goblin hope.
Yeah, he also sacrifices some very expensive High Templars, but he gets the feedbacks off, I suppose. Oh, does actually see these Infestors, lifts them up with the Phoenix, and hey, that's actually not too bad of a start for this fight. It's
really not. Goblin doesn't have to worry about targeting the Broodlords, something on the ground to save, but so many Spore Crawlers still alive. Yeah, just push back.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, like, that Zealot harassment went through, obliterated one hatchery, obliterated another hatchery, so he really did reduce the economy of SortOf for a long time, but SortOf reestablished all of those bases, and now he has 3 pretty fresh mining bases, so whereas these trades have looked kind of okay for a little while, as the game goes on, SortOf just has a much better economy, and he is going to be able to outproduce Goblin.
Oh yeah. Goblin had a problem with detection as well. Had to cast Revelation on Creep Tumor so he could actually place the 4th base down. There's Creeps right in the way. Well,
he's taking out all these Corruptors, and now the Broodlords are going to be a bit exposed. He's taking out all the Spore Crawlers as well, or all but one of them that does shortly go down. So things are not all sad and tears for Goblin. He's managed to narrow the army supply as well.
Yeah, SortOf didn't have that big of a gas bank. As I said, he only just recently got back up to those mining bases and probably took a little while to saturate the gases as well. He was busy on the front line, so he did not remax quickly at all. And it was on barely any Corruptors. 6 right now, with 4 more on the way, desperately trying to spend money, like actual minerals, building Queens, which, not a bad idea, might not be enough. All the Interceptors are alive. These Carriers have a lot of power to them, and this is Goblin's chance to win.
This is a really, really awkward situation right now for SortOf, because, yeah, you know what? Supplies are actually pretty even. Guess what? It's 93 workers for SortOf right now. That supply is very misleading right now. Goblin just has an impenetrable army.
When I looked like 5 minutes ago, it was like 80 drones, which is still high, but not 93. Maybe he thought he had lost them and then replaced them, but wow, yeah, this is actually going to be game over, I think. SortOf, you know, keeping that front lines and losing the gas economy especially. Apparently it also mismicroed this gas guys are like things here and there. Oh, just overstayed his welcome. Let Goblin see a weakness, and now Goblin's out pushing it.
Zombie Grub, I'm not exactly an expert when it comes to StarCraft. I'm not a Grandmaster level player, but if there's something I do know, it's what triggers people. It's what frustrates people when you have to play a best of 3 or something. And playing versus someone saying, I am on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 base versus a 4 base Protoss player, but I can't break him. And then the Protoss player not only breaks your contain, but then pushes across the map and kills you when they're on literally half the number of bases you are. That's something that triggers people. That's something I actually feel like I know a good bit about.
That is super obnoxious, and I think SortOf knows what his problem was. Besides letting the charge lots kind of run rampant and kill 2 pretty important mining bases, I think he also recognizes, and this is a problem that is hard to recognize in the heat of the moment, but is especially known as Zerg players in this situation. The like, oh, I have a bunch of bases, so I must be able to remax, right? And then push comes to shove, literally, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm not remaxing that fast. What happened? And then they realized they needed more time, basically, to get a bigger bank. If he had not taken some of those last fights, if he had just backed off and be like, okay, man, whatever, be cool, Goblin probably just tries to max out and then sort of actually gets that big bank again. He was plus almost 3,000 mineral income at one point.
Yeah.
That's insane. He would have had a huge bank. The Goblin had the perfect moment to strike.
Yeah, perfect moment to strike. And of course, Mr. Mechanics. He doesn't build up banks, Zombie Grub. He's Mr. Mechanics. He spends it all flawlessly. Which, I won't say actually works against him because, of course, he was spending it well, but maybe goes a little too hard on those workers and is going to end up losing his final remaining Corruptors. He does have a spawning pool. He can make Lings, Zombie Grub. Can Lings turn this game around? I think it may struggle. And Queens.
But seriously, this is like the worst feeling in the world. You know you're in a good position. You know you need just like an extra couple of minutes, and you would have, you know, at least had an army to fight this. And instead, it's the slow death into a bank at the end of the game that you can't spend.
This is so like we've seen the variety of play styles and things that Goblin has been throwing at his opponents because we're almost kind of blessed. We started off on the player that's making this crazy deep run and is playing out of his mind today, given, I guess, what we would normally consider Goblin to be capable of. And this is in a qualifying match as well. But the really, really cool thing that I love about these kinds of players like Goblin is how much they get in your head. Now, again, like through the different playstyles they throw out, but also when they do things like this, when they do things like what he did versus Zanster going for the 2-base all-in, it frustrates people. It throws them off their game and maybe makes them make kind of decisions out of frustration. Sort of like a tried and true, like unbelievably experienced player. So I don't expect that it's going to just make him go full tilt rage mode, like, 13-12, just throw Bailey. Like, I'm not expecting that. But it can make the small things maybe go a little bit worse off. And I guess players just don't play their best when they're not feeling good.
That's definitely true. I would say it's sort of a pretty level-headed guy, so it's hard to see him doing anything too severe. But it is the small things, you know, like maybe you think about the game, so you kind of miss your hatchery timing. It's 18 instead of 17, and then you worry about that, and then it snowballs. But I'll take the time to quickly just we harped a lot on SortOf was in control of the game, was winning the game, and then he lost the game. Right? It's a lot about SortOf. There's times where Goblin, I kind of noted the Viper snipe with the Phoenixes. His Phoenix control has continued to be quite impressive. Versus Terran, it was most obvious by picking up the Widow Mines. But even versus Zerg in those late game situations, he was sniping the correct units and looking for the infestors that were burrowed. That's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. Everything has a spell bar at that point in time. Vipers, Queens, infestors. And there's a bunch of spore crawlers in your way that you literally just can't click on them. Yeah. He was constantly trying to snipe the right units. It was just taking engagements a little too early. But did it matter? No, he ended up winning the game. So it was just really great micro and then good decision to push and win when he saw an opportunity.
Okay. Well, we're going to hop into the game, introduce the players, as we are going to be starting down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. Top of the red Zerg player, Mr. Mechanics. Give it up for SortOf.
In the top left, as the blue Protoss, he is Goblin, and I love our admin Dares in chat right now, and he's piecing it all together, guys. Carriers equal phones equal ting. Phone service carrier. You should go with ting. It all makes sense. Oh my god.
Jesse, please sponsor Goblin. That's what he's really saying.
He should sponsor a Protoss player. Interesting.
Well, actually, yeah, he should sponsor a Protoss player just like Neeb. That's actually one of the requirements for Neeb. If Neeb ever race switch, I don't know, Zombie Grub. Can't make carriers anymore.
You know, he race switched once. I was a little befuddled by this drone, and I thought it was going to go for the proxy hatchery. Decides not to. Just goes for the scout instead.
Yeah, it's something that I think I mentioned before with if you get a bit more aggressive versus a player that has like this huge variety in their playstyle and use a lot of these mind games and stuff. Granted, I don't think that's exactly what, I guess a little bit what tried to happen last game, but sort of was pretty prepared for it. He got a good scout off and everything. But if you do get aggressive, you limit the options of your opponent because they have to play more reactively to you. Oh man, you can see Goblin. This is actually already really worth it because he forces 3 probes off of mining. That alone is worth just microing a drone around.
Yeah. Delay the Nexus a little bit, delay the gas a little bit, nothing too substantial, but everything combined together makes this drone, who lived, by the way, can go back and continue mining. Pretty worth it. And I am still very suspicious. I'm pretty sure the intention was to use that as a proxy hatchery, and then he swapped ideas. Like, to place it right where a proxy hatchery usually is and then just move later. That's a little too weird, but it ends up working out in his favor. Indeed,
but we'll see how SortOf decides to play it out this game. Like I don't think that SortOf is a player that like never cheeses. At least not my impression of him. But I do very rarely see him go for something like super duper cheesy or super duper cheeky. Outside of like maybe ZVZ, but you know what? ZVZ is just its own matchup. I declare that there is nothing that can be considered cheesy in ZVZ because everything goes there. That's a free for all.
Fear Dragon, the Protoss player, declares ZVZ strategies. You heard it here first.
Hey, you know what? When I was at Valencia, I only cast ZVZ Zombie Grove. I feel like an expert in it now.
Okay, I guess that's your excuse. And it's kind of funny. There are some matchups where you just. They don't follow the same rules as the other ones, obviously, but even to a true degree of all. There's general rules about RTS. There's general rules about StarCraft 2. In StarCraft, there's both games, Brood War and StarCraft 2, and sometimes matchups just break it. So sometimes it just feels like ZVZ is its own peculiar thing. But we surprisingly have avoided ZVZ today in a European qualifier. It has been largely in help with Goblin defeating. Or to get here as a Protoss player, but then also a lot of our Terrans appeared first and got knocked out.
Yeah.
Feels bad.
Feels good, man. Feels good.
I don't know about the Terran part. That feels bad.
Yeah. Well, Phoenix first, and actually a second Phoenix on the way as well. So, not exactly what I would say is like, holy cow, groundbreaking mind games over there. Although I think that he did cancel the second Stargate and then rebuilt it as soon as the Overlord got pushed back by the Phoenix. So that's a little bit of mind games as he goes for 3 Stargates. But it's a little bit less typical to go straight for the Phoenix and just skip the Oracle entirely.
Why did he? The Overlord didn't see that it was canceled. Why did he do that?
Because I guess the Overlord, SortOf's mechanics were so on point, Zombie Grub, that he pulled back the Overlord too fast for Goblin to react, so when he canceled it, it's just a normal Zerg player without the mechanics of SortOf would still have that Overlord vision.
You're probably right.
I don't know. I'm just saying stuff now. I'm playing along with the meme at this point.
I can tell. But legitimately, you might be right. He might have thought the Overlord would be a little bit more in vision and then realized it wasn't, so he just kind of had to go, oops, we planted 2 more Stargates anyways. And then it's not like he was trying to hide. He went for 3 Stargates instead of 2. Like, I don't think that's actually a thing that you try and hide. If he sees 2 Stargates, you're just going to assume there's a lot more. Although, some players do just go 2 back into Resident Enclave, so I don't think there's reason to cancel that.
Yeah, I think just expect the unexpected when you're up against Goblin is like the summary of all of that, right? Just Goblin can and will probably do anything against you.
I do like that Goblin just kind of like did away with the cheese, or the all-in rather, if you want to split hairs. last game it was obvious SortOf was on top of scouting. He was going to dedicate to the Overlord speed, which he did again in this game. And yeah, you can still kind of hide your mid-game strategy. You can't hide your early game strategy. So just lets it go, gets the macro game going, and it's obvious what his mid-game strategy is now, mass Phoenix. Although SortOf might be just like, where is the oracles? And constantly expecting the oracles, and there's not going to be any. It's Phoenix charge.
Ooh, okay. This is definitely going to be a bit interesting. We'll see how... Okay, SortOf is throwing down a Spire and an Infestation Pit, while also getting up his Banelings for Baneling speed and everything. He scouts around to the third. He obviously has seen the Phoenix, but how exactly is he going to react to this?
He has those choices, and Goblin sees the choices as well. He was very good about targeting the Infestors down with the Oracles and then picking them up later.
Nice supply block.
Yeah, you're right. SortOf might be getting a little bit tilted from how much damage these Phoenix are doing, but what can you expect when there's about 10 of them on the field? Guaranteed they're going to get something.
Yeah, definitely also really frustrating because like the exact timing the supply block was Infestation Pit just finished up and Spire is about to finish up. So it's almost... I'm sure SortOf, like you said, he's a pretty level-headed guy, but there's always like that moment of like, oh god, are my Corruptors gonna get delayed? Is my Infestors gonna start getting delayed just because of this Overlord like supply block? But he does manage to solve the situation. He has some free supply now and is getting up that fourth.
SortOf is using Abathur, by the way. If you ever want to know. So I was double checking Goblin's vision. He did not see the Spire. He saw everything else, just not the Spire. There might be an assumption based off last game or just in general PvZ late game that it is going to be there. And it's not being used either, so it's not really an important point to note. In fact, what's much more important is how many Infestors are on the way, this time with Pathogen Glands. I think he's going to go up to 6, 5. I can do math.
Yeah. Okay, well, the Oracle is so important in seeing these Infestors, and we do actually have some Lings doing some counter damage. Our Baneling's actually on the other side of the map, the third. They'll only get 3 workers, but man, they got very close to killing a lot more than that.
Yeah.
They got a little bit dangerous.
Caught the tail end. That was very close to losing a very important mineral line. Goblin still wants to go for a 4th base before, he feels very comfortable with his economy, and to lose 20 probes is basically the cost of a 4th base and then some. So, gotta be careful. 5th base on the way now for SortOf. He's going up to Hive. You know, he had gotten to a similar point last game where he was in command. He had Spore Crawlers. He had every single tech in the book, including Hive tech with Geno Glands and Broodlords, and he was definitely in control. He just overstayed his welcome after losing so much economy.
He is going to go for Neural Parasite this game, so it looks like his strategy is going to change a bit from the last game. It's also worth noting that Goblin, having warped in so many Zealots, even though he had like these multiple Stargates and might actually be dealing with a big Ling run by pretty soon, like the really quick walling in on that pylon, but it's only going to save him for so long. Such an overcharge being... Okay, he is going to be able to push this back, but I was going to say, like, he's been very far from continuous carrier production, and it's going to allow him to do this big attack early on. This actually could do quite a bit, but has to be so careful about fungal growth potential.
Oh, there's nothing to see the Infestors, because if he had a detection on them, he's probably lifting them up and taking this into his advantage. He still picks up the Queens, however, spread out, so the fungals aren't doing too much. And this works out okay.
Oh god, he's gonna find a lot of Overlords over here. This is not gonna supply block SortOf at all though, because SortOf lost a lot of supply, and also, these fungal growths are actually really nice.
Oh no, I think he has enough to pop them all. Oh no.
Oh boy, that's a frustrating feeling.
Yeah, that was almost all of his Phoenixes. If 8 Phoenixes are alive, that's still enough to do something, but 4 Phoenix is pretty lame, and again, if he just had Revelation or an Observer coincidentally right there, he would have maybe gotten such a good trade off of this, because all those Infestors would have been lifted. He had so many Phoenixes. Now he's the one that's in trouble.
Yeah, and of course 4th base is not exactly incredibly early over here, so he does have to make sure he defends this. He really doesn't want to have to cancel this, and he has to build up that carrier count. He's got 65 workers, he's got a decent economy, and he will be able to continue producing them, but I feel like SortOf is actually just so much more prepared for the big carrier fight this game. Like you talked about how last game it felt like he rushed up for all these small little pieces of dealing with the carriers, and then at the end he was like, cool, I got like 3 Broodlords and like some Spore Crawlers and like 1 Infestor and stuff. But this game it's like he has a good number of Infestors. He has Ultra Cavern finished up. He's got like a decent number of these Lings for counterattacks. He has a lot of the pieces in like large numbers this game.
Yeah, I definitely like the mass Infestors. I like the Ultras instead of... Broodlords, yeah, thank you, exactly, instead of Broodlords. And I like that he also waited on his Corruptors, you know, that now that he has a huge economy, he'll be able to make them anyways, and don't turn them into Broodlords, let the Ultras take care of whatever's on the ground. I like something a little bit better. But the downside of what has happened this game, or actually, not even what has happened, but just the map being chosen, and this was SortOf's map choice. The downside is that SortOf can't get his Spore Crawler line nice right up close to Goblin this time. Last game on Mech Depot, it's a pretty small map once you break down those rocks, and he had that Spore Crawler line against the 4th base. That should never happen at such an higher. Maybe a 6th or 7th.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard to, I guess, reproduce that kind of thing. I like also that Goblin has still just been very active with these Phoenix. Like, it's a really small thing, but he's literally facing this aggression. The Infestors and Ultras and Lings are all outside of his front door. He's still just maneuvering and checking around the main base with his Phoenix, which I really like. But okay, here we go. We may be seeing the big engagement pretty soon.
I'm not sure Goblin can take an engagement. He doesn't have any Void Rays. He's trying to now, but he also doesn't have any Storms ready. He morphed them all into Archons, so even though his Storm is done, yeah, he can't actually use them.
All right, making some more Archons, saying that there's no Vipers to really feed back, and there are the Neural Parasites on almost every carrier.
Well, that might just be it. There's literally, I don't think there's anything attacking right now.
Yeah. Carriers are pretty much getting cleaned up at this point. Goblin put up a valiant effort, but SortOf really seemed to find a handle on dealing with Goblin this game and completely shut things down. I think shutting down that Zealot attack more than anything else really put him into a solid position.
Yeah, I'm shutting down the Zealots, shutting down the Phoenixes, and then, you know, I think at the end there, we had Goblin so panicked, realizing that he wasn't prepared for the fight. He had to warp in High Templars, that he kind of just, not necessarily forgotten, but he didn't use any feedbacks. He had Revelation on those Infestors, and he didn't have enough feedbacks in the first place, but then he also just was so worried about literally everything. The lack of splash, the lack of feedbacks, that he was missing very crucial elements to a late-game Protoss army. I think he had a Ryan, oh my god, Mr. Indecisives. That's sure. Thank you for the Twitch Prime resub. And since that was a rather long 2 games, before we get into game number 3, we're going to take a 2-minute break. See you guys soon. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry I took an extra couple of seconds. Had to add message the admin something. The losers bracket is actually matching quite nicely with the winners, which doesn't usually happen, so they coordinate there. But guys, it is the ace match in the bottom right. As the red Zerg, it is SortOf.
And his opponent up in the top left, we have the pink Protoss player. Give it up for Goblin. So, Zombie Garb, we've seen 2 games where Goblin has gone really focused in on getting to that big air sky toss army, but that's not exactly how he played versus Zanster. Do you, after like seeing how that last game went and how well SortOf handled things, do you want to see him go for something a little bit more aggressive and kind of like skip the sky toss, or do you want to just see him do it a 3rd game in a row?
I think Goblin's got to go with what's worked, and that is sky toss. But I do like that SortOf, and SortOf's the one, by the way, that has to kind of change his tune here. SortOf is the one that chose this map again, and I like this decision much better than Ascension to Ire. I think Ascension to Ire is usually a safe map for most races. I don't like as a Terran, but that's just me. But he had great success with that push in the very first game because Mech Depot was small once the rocks were broken. And I think even he realized, like, I had a winning position. I just kind of threw away the possibility. Last game, he couldn't even get the Spore Crawlers on the front, still won, sure, but I think the Spore Crawlers would actually help a lot. No, Goblin chose this map. I got the things reversed. Well, yeah, that was my bad. I was a little too caught up in and I guess SortOf's game plan. But it's still, I want to still have the point that Goblin chooses this map. I find that interesting. Maybe he did plan an all-in. SortOf, though, just kidding. Doesn't matter. For everything I ever said, Roachborn on the way.
I actually, okay, yeah. Roachborn on the way is definitely going to say that this is not going to be likely leading into the carrier game unless there's like some miraculous hold and they end out even or something. But I was going to say maybe Goblin was thinking about this, because if you knock down those rocks, it's going to be an okay map for going for that air, sky, and toss army. You kind of defend one area, but for now he's going to have to be worrying about defending his natural base as Goblin. Yeah. He has been going for the early scouts, and he didn't see the Roachborn with this.
No, he just checked the natural base, made sure there wasn't an early pool timing, and then left, not even using his probe at the third base, which would be telling him, like, hey, where's that drone, where's that drone, where's that drone? This is bad news. And it looks like Goblin with his Twilight Council was perhaps planning something aggressive himself. They both had ideas of using a smaller map, sort of, though, with a lot more in a hurry. 2-base Roach all-in is not too popular nowadays, but it looks like it will be quite effective.
Yeah, and the funny thing about how production works, especially for Protoss players, is that when you are planning to go for a big aggressive push, I would say even 5 seconds before your big push hits, you actually have like almost nothing. It's about that first burst production from the warp in of gateway units. So Goblin actually, just because he was looking to get aggressive, but later on, is likely just going to have even less things available. He's not going to have things like a mothership core. He's not going to have things like a few additional gateway units to help defend a third base against a small attack. This actually might just be the most one-sided game of the series so far.
Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. And in fact, GG,
that's pretty one-sided.
Super quick.
A flawless game from SortOf. He literally loses nothing.
Yeah, actually. He didn't have to spend any time there. You're kind of building up to it, but no mothership core, no production as the attack actually happens, because that's what Goblin's been doing. Because even if it was a Stargate, that Stargate would have like maybe an Oracle pop out. How helpful is that really? There's the lack of a mothership core, the lack of scouting hurts.
Yeah, like it's not even just Goblin. It's like, I feel like a lot of Protosses these days, everyone just sort of like looks at some of the Koreans for sure, but also just Neeb, who I think is notorious for saying, yeah, I don't need a mothership core. I'll get my mothership core when throwing down like my 4th base, because then maybe around then I'll need a photon overcharge or something. And you're like, okay, Neeb, if you feel like you can get away with it. And then Neeb gets away with it, and every other Protoss player just thinks, well, if Neeb can do it, I can do it. It doesn't actually work out that way a lot of the time. But yeah, well, we're starting to see kind of where some of the dangers of that could be. But also just like, I think not having the scouting information you were saying on the 3rd was a huge deal, because that would have given them extra time to react a bit. It
would have at least, aroused suspicion.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, at least get like a secondary wall off going. Like the units don't just walk in and win. Like maybe you finish up warp gate technology. Maybe you get a round of units. Maybe you start up a mothership core. Like things, there are options there. Like an extra 15 seconds of realization, but
yeah,
that's the way it goes.
But that was a really good use of, again, Goblin's map choice, corrected myself, but it was a smaller map, and sure, they could have played to late games, either one of them, had a similar map to Mech Depot, but instead they both had ideas of being aggressive, and SortOf also probably recognized he didn't get a mothership core, and he doesn't scout my main base. So, yeah. Perfect opportunity on a smaller map to do that.
But that means that SortOf is qualified for TING, the TING Open Season 4. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, he will be put into the groups, and now we are going to be looking for our next qualified player. So in the losers bracket, we had Hush defeat Geralt. A little exciting to see. He's kind of an up-and-coming Protoss, but he's waiting for the winner of Xanser and Clem. Xanser currently up 1-0, but we might be waiting for that series to end. As soon as he can get into a lobby, we will. But first, of course, talking about TING a little bit, they're sponsoring this tournament, which will last for about a month and a half, really, from October to November. It's currently $4,000, but there are incentives to raise the prize pool. There is a match arena that's going to be linked in the chat, and we'll be definitely pushing that as the tournament continues, but it's a whole big thing. If you guys have tuned into any of the ones from the previous seasons, you know it's a great time, and if you are interested in swapping mobile phone service carriers, then TING might be just right for you. If you live in the US, if you don't use a lot of data, you're around Wi-Fi a lot, then this is exactly the type of plan you need. So without further ado, I'll let them describe a little bit more. Thanks for watching, guys.